Welcome to the Code of Entry podcast, where we cloud the issues with facts and help you upskill to stay on the digital edge. Here's your host, Greg, with the latest.
Hey team, Greg here with your Code of Entry podcast. Good to see you again. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about upskilling, reskilling, continuous education, any way that you put it. And really I have a love for this because it's really where I am. How I got where I am today is through upskilling. So I brought my iPad out here so I could try to look through and skim through some stuff for you and give you some resources. But really, people aren't born knowing all of this stuff, right? We're in this technology world. A lot of stuff's changing. First, everybody got good with computers because computers were new. Great. Then it's the World Wide Web. And, we all learned about the internet. Maybe learned how to make some web pages, make some money online. Awesome. Then it was the cloud. VMs made it possible. So we started talking about cloud computing for everything. Okay, what's after the cloud? Well, right now it looks like it's generative AI and still cloud computing, right? Probably starting to get down to hybrid approaches, what I personally term sky computing, but having this hybrid approach to where you have cloud resources talking to on-prem resources, everything in the middle that lets them talk and authenticate and all that kind of stuff. So how do you get into this? Well, let me take you back in time. So I come out of high school, not really challenged in high school. Sorry, I was one of those people. Then I go to West Point, not the same academic experience. Much harder, but also I didn't really care about academics. I went to West Point, so I was worried about learning how to lead people. And then I was doing martial arts, so my club. I was worried about those two things more than the academics. I was going to graduate and lead soldiers. My grades didn't matter. Yeah, looking back on it, I could have taken better advantage of that opportunity. But it is what it is. So I go through, do some things in the Army, and then I get selected to go teach at West Point in my master's program. And I'll tell people, I think that's where I learned to learn. And I'm not one of those folks that thinks that you have to have a degree for everything. I think you can go online, be mentored by someone, and learn how to do a lot. I don't think you necessarily need a degree. But my degrees are where I learned how I learned. So by the time I was in a master's program, probably midway through, it really clicked for me okay, I'm not just rusty. I've knocked all the rust off where I haven't been studying and stuff. I really get this now. I can teach myself new things very quickly. I can learn this. This is great. But it's because in that whole journey of being a kid at college, even though I was 18, graduating, maturing a lot in the Army, and then going back to get a master's, I'd really I learned how I worked and I learned how I learn. So fast forward, I'm teaching at West Point, and another great lesson there was not only did I learn how I learned how other people learned because I was teaching subjects, right? I've got this down. That's great. If you can't explain it, you're worthless in that job. So that was kind of the next step was not only could I learn things, I could teach other people. Okay, awesome. Next step, and I'm getting to the point, I promise. Next step, I take a job after teaching at West Point where I'm supposed to be a data scientist. And the narrative going around is, oh, hey, he's this specially trained data scientist that the Army has trained to do this, and he knows X, Y, and Z. Spoiler alert, no special training. So here I am. I've been a chief information officer in a department at West Point. I've talked to some academic committees to get funding for the department and computers and stuff that we need, but data science? Okay, what's data science? And it was relatively new at the time, right? So it's sounds super intimidating. Well, turns out it's just regular math and having an understanding of systems and problems and trying to use math to solve problems. So yeah, I'd been using computers and math to solve problems for a while, and okay, great, but specially trained data scientist. Anyway, so I have huge imposter syndrome. I show up at this, organization where I'm supposed to be a data scientist, and yeah, I put in a lot of work. And I'll say that that's the point that I really started doing this kind of continuous education thing seriously. So get there. I learned what Udemy is, which is the best thing ever. I was already familiar with using YouTube to try to learn some things. But I would sit there and I was a sponge. The guy that I was supposed to replace one day, I had like a year almost that we worked together, went everywhere with him. Paid attention, everything he said, what he was doing, and I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, how does he know all this? Oh my God, I'm never going to be able to fill these shoes. So 2 points on the fill the shoes part. You don't have to fill somebody's shoes. You're your own person. You're going to bring your own strengths. So I would normally say, well, I'm not trying to fill their shoes. I'm going to stand next to the shoes that they left and hopefully be able to be valuable to you from that position. The other thing is don't sell yourself short. You can fill other people's shoes. But it's not about the other person part. It's just about picking up and being willing to learn. So willing to learn, take over this big data system, ends up going from like 10 servers in a data center somewhere to maybe arguably the largest in the Army and arguably the largest in the Department of Defense outside of like the intelligence community, secret squirrel stuff, right? So we've got this system, and that system was made because we get in there, it's like, hey, you're going to do data science. Well, it's really hard to do data science without data. So then we had to get the data. We get the data. Okay, we got data. Now I could science the data, but I don't have any tools. Okay, so then we build tooling on top of the data. And it's like, okay, that's super cool, but now somebody has to ask you or another data scientist to answer a question. So then it's making it consumable to the average person, creating apps and analytics on top of it that a routine user could get access to. And during that whole journey, right, it becomes, okay, what do you learn? It's like, oh, well, I need data science. Okay, had to figure out that was math using computers, and wasn't always big data for data science, even though I tended towards big data because of my job. So it's like, okay, that started with, I already know how to use R. A lot of folks don't know how to. It's kind of a niche statistical computer program. Then it was like, hey, it was a fight between R and Python. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, R is going to win. I just say that because I don't know anything about Python. Oh my God. So then I learned Python. And then looking today at R and Python, I would probably argue R has been dominated as an alternative by Python. There might be a couple of niche things that it's good for. Certainly use it as a math student. But for data science, Python might be the route to go. So that's, a learning objective. Hey, I need to know about R and Python. Well, then the next thing is I need to know about the packages that you can use in both. What do the packages do? How do I get access to the math? How do I host those? So you're starting with programming languages, packages for programming languages. You're talking about data engineering. You're talking about a whole bunch of things that end up getting covered in like data governance, because you're going to make a change. That change could affect someone else who has the authority to do X, Y, or Z. Well, at first I got to hand wave a lot of that stuff because I was coming from the position of being the only person. And then the team became like two or three people. And anyone else just listened to us. Okay, that's cool. But then as things scale, that is not scalable. People don't scale, systems scale. So I wanted to go through, as I was learning these things, right? Udemy was where I went. I'd had some side interest in doing web development and stuff. I'd made some apps before. So I ended up finding myself on Udemy like every weekend. And I just wanted to kind of go through what my Udemy sounded like from that journey that I went through, where I was perceived an expert, had imposter syndrome, and the way that I dealt with that was learning, right? I'm going to have that job regardless if I know what I'm talking about or not. So I want to be part of the solution and actually know what I'm talking about, which honestly will get you ahead of most people in conversations. To where now I get these comments, oh, you're so smart, you're so technical, you've been doing this forever, oh, you went to school for that. Like, okay, well, I'm not that smart. I try hard. I'm not that technical. Maybe I am. I joke, there's a saying about being an inch deep and a mile wide. It's like, okay, I'm a mile wide and maybe 6 inches deep. So you can get farther, you can get deeper than me on topics pretty quickly. But what I've tried to do in my upskilling and my continuous education is continue to get deep on things that matter and lean forward and try to figure out what's next and get deep enough on those that I can manage those teams, that I can make decisions that are informed. I don't need to be the one on the keyboard all the time. And you might be the person that's on the keyboard, and that's great. But I would challenge you that it's still worthwhile to look at, okay, what's next? What's coming up? Right now, if you're a sysadmin and you don't know how to deploy a large language model in something like SageMaker, I would challenge you to do that. That would be a good step. That would be good future proofing, because we're going to have a lot of routine tasks reallocated to large language models and generative AI in the near future. Okay, great. Position yourself to support the deployment of those, to support the implementation of those, right? Just an example. So I'm going to go through what's in my Udemy account and maybe talk a little bit about some of them. So I've got several AWS Solutions Architects things. I've got a AWS hoodie on here where I went to the reInvent conference, favorite conference. So I wanted to be able to look around the AWS offerings, because that's what we used in our job. We used AWS and know what was available. Not just what we used, but what was coming out. What could complement what we were doing, and always continue to push that. Because invariably someone would ask the question, well, why are you doing what you're doing? Or why aren't you doing X? And the only reason they knew X is because they had Googled it real quick before you walked in, right? And being prepared for that. I've got a digital marketing masterclass. I've actually read some marketing books, some selling books, because while I haven't been marketing or selling really in my career till now, what you have is I need to be able to communicate things to people effectively and get them to agree with me or make a decision that I'm recommending. And so knowing how to influence people, even when you might not be in charge, is very important. So that's why I've got marketing stuff. Data science and machine learning course. This one's from Isaac Faber. It's a must. It's pretty good. And Azure from Zero to Hero. Never administered a system in Azure personally. I'm typically AWS fan over Azure. I think most things in Azure are dominated by AWS. I need to know what I'm talking about. So there's an Azure from Zero to Hero course, and that was the first one that I got. Here's another one that's certifications across AWS. So it's sysadmin, developer, security, data science. Again, just trying to be broad. There's one for the CISP exam. So Certified Information Security Professional. What else? CSSP, Microsoft Security Operations Analyst, microservices with Node.js and React. Microservices started being a thing and coming up, and folks would ask, hey, why aren't you using microservices in this design? It's like, I'm not really sure you know what you're talking about, but microservices. Okay. So to be able to talk to people that APIs are really just microservices used in a different way, and the reason we don't use microservices is because I have multiple apps, and every app making all of its own microservices that can talk to other apps' microservices is a really messy problem to have as you scale, and you really want internal microservices in an app or a namespace in Kubernetes that can talk to an authoritative API layer that brokers communications between apps. Hey, I could have that conversation thanks to, that class. And then I'm kind of a dork web developer on the side, so Node.js was just a plus there. I've got Network Plus, Sec Plus. Here's the AWS Certified Security Specialist, Azure security exam. What else? A class on AWS guard duty that came out relatively recently, and it's like, hey, how can I use this to secure my cloud? I have a security system for the cloud and for the network. Am I doing what this does? What can we emulate? Can we use this as the gatekeeper for our system, right? Again, just holistically, what can you find? I've got a WordPress developer course. Hey, spoiler, most of the websites on the web are WordPress. Literally most. There's some inherent security concerns that can come with that. Not if you keep your website updated and I'll say you know what you're doing, but you just do simple best practices like, hey, admins have multi-factor authentication. Okay, I keep my themes updated. I only install plugins that I trust. And if you want to get into making websites, WordPress is definitely how you can get in and get the most bang for your buck. I like WordPress websites because you can pay less and get more. It's an interesting proposition, right? If you can deal with something not being 100% perfect, custom the way that you would want it, WordPress is the way to go because you can get to 95% very quickly and very cheaply. All right, I've got a web developer bootcamp. Another great thing about, there's no affiliate link for Udemy or anything here, but another good thing about these classes, they stay updated. I got that class in like 2018. It's been updated through 2023. So whenever new packages get released, things change, the course changes, and it kicks my progress bar back down. So I've only done 31% of that web development bootcamp. And it's taught by a person, Dr. Angela Yu, who's my favorite teacher on Udemy. And her content's really good. So when it gets kicked back, I want to catch up. I've got a CI/CD DevOps project using Git, Jenkins, Ansible, and Kubernetes. Again, leading developers, knowing how CI/CD processes and pipelines work and some of the components is important. Here's the complete Kubernetes course, because Kubernetes has been relatively new as we shifted from bare metal to virtual machines in cloud, and then to containers, and then Kubernetes. I'll say, and then it's really complementary, but Docker and Kubernetes, I had to learn what was going on, and that really drove the direction of my development thoughts now, using Kubernetes and containers. See, I've got a certified data analytics specialty, data engineering, machine learning specialty, data lakes in AWS, 100 days of code, Python bootcamp, Elastic 8. Now, Elasticsearch is interesting because we used to use that in my system, and then we ended up going towards the AWS branch of Elasticsearch when they changed their licensing terms. I would say that Elasticsearch is a technology that is not understood by most people, most technologists, and is underutilized. Whether it's the quote-unquote name brand or something else, if you don't know what Elasticsearch is, I would look into it, because the Elk stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, and they've added a Beats to that. You can get information, move information, display information, save information, search information so easily. And when you go to like a big cybersecurity conference, I said that I really like AWS reInvent. Well, it's because you can learn, and there's a bunch of new things every year. The shift in the industry this year towards large language models on the fly, all of a sudden, the change that you saw in 1 year was mind-blowing and very impressive. Cybersecurity conferences, you're seeing people that build things on top of the Elk stack. You have 1,000 vendors selling you the same thing with a different color scheme on it. And then they're also be like, oh, we use AI. Well, until this last year with generative AI becoming so big and accessible, no, they weren't. But in any case, sorry. I've got APIs in PHP. PHP is the language that I've used the most over time. I've heard for years and years, yeah, PHP is going to die. There's going to be this. There's going to be that. There's this new language. PHP's here and still kicking. So going back to that WordPress thing, WordPress uses a lot of PHP. PHP, hey, you can get away with HTML, CSS, JavaScript on the client side, but on the server side, you need something. PHP's been working reliably for years. I've got a Flutter and Dart bootcamp. I'm really interested in Flutter and Dart. I don't think they have emerged as much as I thought they would yet. So I'm probably a D at those, but I have the course in the boot camp. I had a soldier that really liked it, talked about we should be using more of this. I wanted to get educated. So there you go. I've got an Ansible course for beginners, an advanced Ansible course, a blockchain and how to make your own EFTs and cryptocurrency course, because hey, everybody knows about cryptocurrency right now, right? Most people would kind of block that as blockchain. Oh yeah, that's that crypto stuff. Okay. It's not, but it's similar. They're related. So that's great. But the blockchain is that immutable ledger idea, right? And it's very powerful. And as a guy doing data science, working in a data system where you want to have provenance, you want to have security, you don't want things to be able to be manipulated and changed, blockchain is very attractive. So, hey, I had to get smart on it, right? And then I've got a ethical hacking course, and I have a couple hacking courses on here. And because mostly as a defense guy, well, you have to know what the offense is doing, right? Defense in a vacuum is not going to get you anywhere. So, that's kind of the breadth that you see in my Udemy by itself. Okay, I've done a data science certificate program from MIT. That's separate from this, not for the credential, but for the class. The class was actually really good and practical. I think I've done a Cloud Plus boot camp. I've done a PMP. So there's a bunch of stuff, right? But it ends up being, how can I make myself better? Because you don't know what's next. So I sit here in this chair thinking about, okay, what am I working on right now? How do I make things better? How do I advance technology? I do not have any specific revolutionary ideas. However, I do have ideas for like how you can bring components together and use them to their maximum potential to solve a problem. Because I don't think, I have this opinion that wicked problems aren't a thing. If you have a wicked problem, you're not looking at it correctly. I think that if you frame the problem and you do some problem definition, you can come up with a solution. You can at least get to better, right? Don't let better be the enemy of perfect. It's like, oh yeah, we could do this project, but we'll need $70 million in 4 years. So when we can get $70 million, we'll start. Okay. Well, if I can get $5 and plug this hole, can we do that? No, we have to wait till we get 70 million. No, right? Let better be better. Continue to get better, continue to strive. A few ideas sitting here. If you're not using ChatGPT in your business, you need to get an account. The free account's fine. Get an account and go. If you're coding and you're not using Copilot or Code Whisperer, you got to change that. If you're coding and you're still using Atom, you need to upgrade that, right? Upskill yourself, because Google dumped Atom, which was my favorite text editor, and go to VS Code. Or if you're a open source person that doesn't like that VS Code is closed, use VS Codium. All you have to do to know about that stuff is Google it and start looking. Hey, I want to use the terminal. Hey, get a class on how to use the terminal. If I go back, that's one thing that I learned across these classes that I think I undervalued before I knew what I was doing. And that's, the terminal window is not scary. If I have to create a file on my computer now, I right click on the folder location and I go and I say, open command line in this location. And then I type touch space and I put in the file that I want to create, enter, or make a dir or make a directory. And I'll sit there, and if I'm going to make text files, outlines, a new program, whatever, I'll make all the files right there, and then I'll drag the folder into my VS Code, and I've got everything pre-configured and set up. It's just the way that I like to do it. And I never could have done that because I opened that, that black screen and get super intimidated. Hey, I downloaded iTerm 2. I took all these classes, and a lot of them shared that you had to use the command line for stuff. And once you get past the first hurdle and you can start installing stuff to your computer using Homebrew, you're starting to get dangerous. Because then instead of going around the internet, finding the right file, downloading it, installing it, you can type a quick command, hit enter, something installs, all its dependencies installed, it gets set up, you can update it in one place. Awesome. Then you can start navigating around directories, and whenever you need to do troubleshooting, you've got it. Or when you start taking these classes and you get to that next level of upskilling, and if you're a sysadmin out there, sorry, I'm probably boring you to tears because you're in the command line all the time. But once you can get comfortable with the command line, then you can start using these command line interfaces for things. If you've ever been in the AWS console, there's 9,000 different buttons you can click. The AWS CLI can be a lifesaver. So I'll get off that soapbox. So the point here was, regardless of who you are, what your background is, continuing education is something that we have to do. Continue to upskill. You're going to find yourself in a position where you have imposter syndrome and you want to get better. Okay, happens to everybody. And I would argue that if you don't have imposter syndrome, you might need to take a look at yourself. Because if you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not growing. But also, as large language models and generative AI continue to progress, yeah, there are going to be jobs at risk and stuff. And if you don't have imposter syndrome and you're not pushing yourself, hey, there's risk there. Now, if you're listening and you have a more manual job or something, okay, great, good for you. Everybody strives to do different things. But personally, I'm always uncomfortable sitting where I'm at. I've always got to learn more. I've got to do more. There's something next I want to know, or I've got a hole in my swing, right? And I don't want a hole in my swing. So, just my thoughts on continuing. So, for all those out there with imposter syndrome, keep hustling. You're doing the right thing. If you don't have imposter syndrome and you're in a technical job, you're at risk, or you might be a danger to whoever you're advising because you can't know everything. Yeah, so there's maybe my unpopular take for the thing. Get some imposter syndrome. Go find resources, whether you're going to a university, you're going to YouTube, you're going to Udemy, whatever it is, and keep on hustling.
Thanks for listening. Find us on social media at Code of Entry and online at codeofentry.com. Check back for new episodes or join the team by signing up for notifications. Until next time, keep hustling.